Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
If you wanted to punish someone in the deepest way possible, not with a fist, not with a shout, but with something quieter and far more devastating, you would take away every voice around them. You would leave them completely alone. That's not a metaphor. Solitary confinement is considered one of the harshest punishments a human being can endure, even worse than physical violence, according to many who have survived it. And there's a reason for that. For most of human history, being cut off from the group didn't just feel bad. It meant you would probably die. No tribe, no protection, no food. So somewhere deep in our wiring, most of us learn the same silent rule. Stay close, stay liked, stay connected, or you won't survive. That's why an empty room can feel unbearable to so many people. Why a quiet Saturday night can feel like a punishment. Why silence, real silence, without a phone buzzing or a show playing, can feel almost frightening. But there is a small group of people who never got that memo. And I don't mean introverts in the way we usually talk about them. The ones who need a little downtime after a party before they're ready to be social again. I'm talking about something rarer, something far more self-contained. I'm talking about the self-sufficient introvert. Here's the difference most people miss. A typical introvert still wants connection. They still crave being understood, being seen, being chosen. They simply get tired faster in a crowd and need to retreat to recharge before going back out to look for that connection again. A self-sufficient introvert is built differently. They don't retreat to recover from the world and then go looking for validation. They retreat into a fully running internal world that never actually shuts off. From the outside, people assume their life must be sad, quiet, empty. But if you could actually step inside their evenings, you'd find the opposite. Their solitude isn't a blank page. It has its own architecture, its own projects, its own rhythm, its own quiet momentum. They process themselves, comfort themselves, and rebuild themselves without needing an audience to confirm any of it is real. Give them 2 weeks alone with a personal project, and they don't come back depleted. They come back sharper, steadier, more alive than when they left. So why does their mind work this way? And why is a trait the world has quietly labeled antisocial actually one of the most powerful psychological advantages a person can have? Let's go inside the science of it. Psychologists have a name for what's happening here: high internal complexity. Think of the human mind as a kind of engine. For most people, that engine runs like a device that needs to be plugged in. It needs a constant feed of outside stimulation. Conversations, notifications, gossip, plans, noise to keep running. Cut the cord and the engine sputters. People start to feel bored, restless, even a little panicked. The self-sufficient introvert's mind doesn't work like a device that needs plugging in. It works like a generator. It produces its own power. It doesn't need a constant outside feed because there's already an enormous internal world running underneath the surface. When they go quiet, they are not shutting down. They're doing the opposite. They're switching on a set of remarkably active internal processes. They replay old conversations to understand what really happened. They mentally rehearse conversations that haven't happened yet. They take scattered, half-formed thoughts and start connecting them into something whole. None of this is passive. It burns real cognitive energy. The same kind of energy your brain uses to work through a hard problem at your desk. So when they turn down an invitation to stay home instead, it was never about fear of people. It's resource management. Their mind needs quiet the way an athlete's body needs rest between training sessions, not because something is wrong, but because that's exactly how peak performance is built. For them, solitude isn't absence. It's maintenance. And this isn't something that appears suddenly in adulthood after a bad breakup or a burnout season. It usually traces back much further than that. Picture a school playground anywhere in the world. Manila, Toronto, Nairobi, Sao Paulo. Recess bell rings, and most kids sprint outside toward the noise. The football, the chasing games, the clusters of laughter by the fence. But if you look carefully, there's almost always a small handful of kids who quietly stay behind. One is redrawing the same dragon for the 5th time. Another is rebuilding a tower that just fell, completely absorbed. They are not crying in the corner. they are not friendless. They are simply somewhere else, inside their own focus. Adults tend to worry about this. A teacher might gently ask, "Don't you want to go play with the others?" A parent might sign them up for one more group activity, hoping to bring them out of their shell. But there's a distinction worth making here, because it changes everything. Shyness is wanting to join in and feeling too afraid to do it. Self-sufficiency is simply not feeling the pull to join in the first place, because what's happening internally is already enough. Developmental research backs this up. A child who can sit alone, building, drawing, or imagining for hours isn't missing social skills. That's their first workout. The earliest rep in a lifetime of deep, self-directed focus. The 8-year-old redesigning the same blueprint over and over often becomes the architect who can sit with one problem for 11 straight hours without losing the thread. The child who invented entire worlds with action figures on a bedroom floor often becomes the novelist who can disappear into a manuscript for 6 months. The costume changes. The core engine underneath stays exactly the same. So what actually happens inside their nervous system that lets them sit with themselves this comfortably? Researchers have tested this more directly than you might expect. In a well-known psychology study, researchers sat participants alone in a bare room. No phone, no windows, no conversation. Just 15 minutes and their own thoughts. The only twist, there was a button in the room that would deliver a mild but genuinely unpleasant electric shock if pressed. Beforehand, almost every participant said they'd happily pay money to avoid that shock. And yet, once they were left alone, with nothing but their own minds for those 15 minutes, a striking number of people, more than half the men and about a quarter of the women, chose to shock themselves rather than simply sit there and think. Some pressed that button again and again. What the researchers uncovered was uncomfortable but honest. For a lot of people, being alone with an unguided mind isn't peaceful. It's closer to unbearable. Without outside noise to lean on, a network in the brain tied to self-referential thinking switches on. And for many people, without practice steering it, that network spirals into restlessness and discomfort so intense that a jolt of pain feels like a relief by comparison. Now imagine putting a self-sufficient introvert in that same room. That button would sit there completely untouched. For them, 15 minutes of silence isn't a sentence to serve. It's 15 minutes of unclaimed freedom. Their mind doesn't scream for outside fuel. It opens up, like a studio with the lights finally turned on, and starts generating, replaying, reimagining, enjoying its own company the way someone else might enjoy a great film. They are not simply better at tolerating loneliness. They are having a genuinely rich, satisfying experience, one that people who've never sat with themselves for more than a few minutes may struggle to even imagine. Relationships become a choice, not a rescue. This self-contained inner world reshapes almost everything about how they move through life. And the first place you'll see it is in their relationships. Watch how a lot of people enter friendships, relationships, or friend groups. So often, it comes from a quiet sense of not enough. Not enough company, not enough certainty, not enough proof that they matter. And when connection is built on filling a gap like that, it tends to produce exactly what you'd expect. People-pleasing, shrinking your own standards, staying in situations far longer than they deserve to be stayed in. The self-sufficient introvert walks into relationships already whole. They're not scrolling through contacts on a lonely Friday night looking for someone, anyone, to fill the space. So when they do choose to spend their evening with you, it means something completely different. It's not a rescue. It's a genuine choice. They're there because they actually value your mind, your honesty, your company. Not because they needed a body in the room to make the silence stop. That doesn't mean more relationships. It usually means fewer. But the ones that remain tend to be some of the most honest, unpressured relationships a person can have. Second, notice how they respond when everything around them is falling apart. We live in a world where panic spreads almost instantly. A bad headline in the group chat, a tense meeting at work, one person's anxiety becoming everyone's anxiety within minutes. Most people get pulled straight into that current. The self-sufficient introvert tends to have something closer to a built-in buffer. Because they're constantly processing internally already, there's a small but crucial gap between whatever just happened and however they choose to respond to it. Instead of reacting instantly, they pull the situation into their own private workspace first. They separate the noise from the facts. They ask what's actually true versus what's just loud. So in the moment when everyone else in the room is raising their voice, they're often the one who stays quiet, absorbs it, thinks it through, and then delivers the one sentence that actually moves things forward. And this leads to the third thing, maybe the most important one. Anyone who has ever studied negotiation knows a simple rule. Whoever needs the deal, more holds less power. In unhealthy workplaces, in manipulative relationships, one of the most reliable tools people use to control others is the threat of isolation. The fear of losing status, losing the group, being left out in the cold. But try threatening isolation against someone who already treats solitude like home. The self-sufficient introvert holds a quiet kind of leverage that almost nobody can take from them, the readiness to simply leave. Because they were never addicted to attention and never afraid of silence, their boundaries don't bend the way most people's do under pressure. They can walk away from a toxic job, a one-sided friendship, a room full of people who don't value them, calmly, without needing to make a scene. For them, going back to being alone was never the punishment. It was always just going home. Real freedom was never about how many people you can gather around you. It's about how many things you're able to say no to without flinching. Look at the world we're living in right now, and one thing becomes obvious. Attention has quietly become a kind of currency. We're taught to document the meal before we eat it, post the trip before it's even over, share the achievement, the sunset, sometimes even the heartbreak. Because somewhere along the way, many of us absorbed the idea that if it isn't seen, it somehow didn't fully happen. Why does it sting so much to not be tagged in the group photo? Why does missing an invitation feel like being erased? Because in a culture built around visibility, it's easy to quietly believe that being unseen means falling behind, that an experience without an audience is worth less than one with one. The self-sufficient introvert tends to operate on a completely different internal compass. Psychologists call it an internal locus of evaluation, judging your own life by your own standards instead of outsourcing that judgment to likes, views, or comments. They finish a beautiful book and simply sit with it. No need to photograph the cover. They complete a project and feel proud because they know the work was good, not because someone else confirmed it. They cook a meal that turns out perfectly and enjoy it in their own kitchen with no one watching, and it doesn't lose an ounce of meaning. This doesn't mean they reject connection or disappear from the world. They can still show up, still share, still celebrate loudly when they want to. But attention was never the foundation their worth was built on. It's a bonus, never a requirement. When a person truly understands and accepts who they are, outside approval becomes something nice to receive, never something they need in order to feel like they matter. So if you strip this whole idea down to its core, here's what remains. Introversion is about how you process energy and information. Self-sufficiency is about not needing outside applause to know your own worth. And when those two things live in the same person, you get someone with a rare, quiet steadiness. The kind that doesn't shake easily, no matter how loud the world gets around them. If you've spent your life watching people like this from the outside, stop assuming they need to be coaxed out more. Not everyone who enjoys their own company is struggling. Not everyone who says no to Friday night plans is sad about it. Sometimes they've simply found the one place that recharges them faster than anywhere else, themselves. And if you're watching this and quietly recognizing yourself in every single word, this one is for you. You don't owe anyone an apology for wanting a quiet night in. You don't need to invent an excuse to protect your own peace. You don't have to over-explain your need for space. Not to your family, not to your friends, not to anyone. Being alone was never the same thing as being lonely. Loving silence was never the same thing as being cold or distant. You are allowed to love the people in your life deeply and still need your own room, your own hours, your own quiet to come back to yourself. The ability to sit with your own mind, to think, to reflect, to actually know yourself instead of running from yourself was never a weakness. In a world constantly demanding your attention and your instant reaction, it might be one of the most powerful things you have. If this spoke to something in you today, do one small thing for me. type the words, "I am reclaiming my peace," in the comments below. It takes 10 seconds, and it lets me know this reached exactly who it needed to reach. And if you want more honest, deeply researched conversations about the psychology of who we really are, subscribe to Motivational Humanity and share this with someone who needs permission to enjoy their own company without guilt. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Protect your peace, protect your quiet, and I'll see you in the next one.